Why are so many nostalgic reboots crashing before they even premiere? It's not because audiences are tired of reboots, it's because they're breaking two cardinal rules every successful revival has to follow, and Hollywood keeps making the same mistake. This year alone, we're seeing an explosion of familiar franchises making a comeback. But while some have fans genuinely excited, others are facing backlash before a single episode has even aired. So what's the difference? Today, we're breaking down some of the biggest nostalgia reboots in development and revealing the two rules that separate a hit from a disaster: respecting the history that fans fell in love with, and giving audiences meaningful answers to questions the original story left behind. If you love deep dives into TV shows, hidden details, industry trends, and honest discussions about what's working and what isn't, make sure to hit subscribe and join our community. We post new videos every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now let's dive into the reboots that are getting it right, and the ones that are already setting themselves up to fail.
So this is top of mind for us because we just watched Elle.
Yeah, and that is a prequel from the world of Legally Blonde, and I think that's where we first got to see those two cardinal rules in play. One in a good way, one not so much.
Yeah, they definitely respect the source material. Like, we see a lot of her getting bruiser, showing the lavender scented paper. Like, there's so many callbacks to the original film that it really does respect the material and the character itself. I have to say the actress as well. She has done such a good job of picking up Reese Witherspoon's mannerisms for the character that it does really feel like this is her just at 16 years old.
Yeah, if anything, I would almost say it respects the source material too much, because you see almost the same dialogue frequently throughout, callbacks to the exact same words, to exact scenes, lots of wardrobe choices that seem very similar or reminiscent, and it almost to its detriment that it doesn't give enough time to make its own path.
Yeah, I can see that because it is very much like copy and paste in a lot of the episodes of what the original source material was. But at the end of the day, they respected it.
Oh, absolutely. They did. Even that opening scene where they have her best friend coming to her birthday party and she has the card and it's an exact, remake of the opening scene for the first Legally Blonde with the same, cutesy cursive writing on the card. Such nice touches for such a nostalgic movie.
Yeah. But where it falls apart is that it's not really answering a question. Like, Elle Woods in Legally Blonde had such a big character arc, going from this like vapid California blonde pink everything to a lawyer, a Harvard graduate lawyer. And now we're going back, and I would love to see a little bit more of the backstory, but it's almost like taking away from that character arc.
Yeah, and I think it's an inherent kind of issue with prequels is that you already know the end of the story. You know exactly where Elle is supposed to end up. You know exactly where she's going to end up, even later than that after the movies. And so you kind of end up in this moment where you're watching this show, but she can only learn so much because she has to still be unaware. And that's where the show feels as though it's almost failing because she's having the same realizations she has in Legally Blonde.
Yeah, like, as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, so why was she so surprised and proud of herself for doing some of the stuff in Legally Blonde if she already did it once in Elle? And
she seemed so genuinely hurt in Legally Blonde by social injustice and so surprised that, how could you ever think that she could kill her husband? Of course she couldn't. And then we see her watching similar accusations and different things being thrown in this show, and it's like, you've seen this before.
Yeah.
So it does kind of create some confusion or makes Legally Blonde seem a little, okay, well, you're gonna have to explain the regression then.
Yeah. And I know that they've said that they've actually already filmed season 2. So maybe there is a regression in season 2 that we just don't know about.
Yeah, maybe there's a scenario where she gets, so hurt, or she gets so invested in somebody's life, and just so let down that she goes back to her safe space and goes back to LA and thinks, life was easier when I didn't think about these things, and then she just forgets about it and meets Warner and thus begins Legally Blonde. But it makes it hard to watch the show on its own when you do already know the ending.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, I'll say Lizzie McGuire. Kind of opposite, because it was intended to answer a big question, like, where is Lizzie now? But it never actually got past pilot stage or development because it just fizzled out, in the sense that some felt it wasn't going to honor the source material.
Yeah, so that reboot, they actually filmed, I think it was like 2 episodes of it, and they ended up canceling it because they felt as though it was too mature. It was showing Lizzie, Hilary Duff was very specific about wanting to show her, as an adult, living on her own, making mistakes, definitely a more mature version than the middle school, high schooler that we watched. And Disney Plus did not like that.
Yeah. But in a funny way, we did kind of get to see that come to life in the form of How I Met Your Father. I know it's not the same universe. It's actually a reboot of another show, How I Met Your Mother. But we do get to see Hilary Duff making those mistakes, living out a more mature life. So the actress did get to kind of flex that muscle.
Yeah, and I think there would have been a place for Lizzie McGuire to have that mix of respecting the source material. Obviously, a big part of Lizzie McGuire are those cartoon thoughts that she would have, the mini thought Lizzie that would, crack jokes or, be confused or say her real thoughts that she couldn't say out loud. And I think that would have been fun to see her internal dialogue as a 30-year-old.
So it has to be said for Elle, there are things that really worked for it, and one being the time period. Seeing Elle Wood's style in the 90s, and not even just in the 90s in California, but in 90s in a grunge era, and how she was still going to have her personality, I think was a really cool touch, and I really enjoyed it. But it made me think of someone else.
Yeah, and I think on top of the fashion, it was her bubbly personality. And I think it reminded us both of Buffy.
Yeah.
And that's a rewatch we had done recently, and they had been talking pretty heavily about a Buffy reboot that we were very excited about. Yeah. And they actually filmed a pilot for it, and the executives disliked the pilot so much that they canceled it.
Yeah. And that, I think, is such a shame, because it sounds like they were going to honor a bit of the source material. They likely were going to answer a question, because the end of Buffy, it has a huge question, like, what happens now? And they talk about going to different hellmouths to keep doing what they do. So there's definitely a question to be answered. But for whatever reason, it just fizzled out.
Yeah, and from what the overall consensus or what has come out is that the pilot wasn't strong enough and that people were expecting a lot more Buffy.
Yeah. And I think that's fair, right? She's the main character. There could be a way to hand it off to the next generation, or to even just make it very clear this isn't a continuation of her story. It's just a continuation of the world. And that makes me think completely different genre, but The Office. That's one of my all-time favorite shows. It's been off air for easy, I want to say almost 10 years, if not more. And they have a reboot now. And it's in the same universe. We did get to answer the question, like, what happened to Dunder Mifflin? We actually get to go to the building and see what happened. But it's ultimately in a different city. It's a different cast altogether, except for one character. And that satisfies a lot for the viewers, I think.
Yeah, and I think there would have been a way for Buffy to do that well, because you could have honored the source material while also flipping it on its head. Yeah. I mean, in the original Buffy, she's the only Slayer. Not everyone knows who she is and who the Slayer is, and there's a lot of vampires and other, demon monsters and whatnot. At the end of Buffy, they awaken all the Slayers. So we could have really started this reboot with the opposite. There's so many Slayers that the vampires and beasts and whatnot are more in hiding. You can't just go to your nearest cemetery and find a couple of them. So I think there could have been a really good way to honor the source material while giving its own legs to stand on. But a lot of that comes down to really good casting. And I think Elle got it right. They got such good chemistry in all of the characters, New and Elle Woods, that really worked, and maybe Buffy just wasn't able to do that.
Yeah. That will still go down as one of the biggest shames that we don't get that continuation.
There's always hope that they'll try it again and that they'll figure it out again, right? I mean, Sarah Michelle Gellar has had quite the resurgence in the past few years. I feel like we're seeing her in everything, and you know, she took a trip down memory lane with I Know What You Did Last Summer. So I'm hopeful she'll take another trip down the lane for Buffy, because that is such an iconic universe and we need vampire TV on our screens. If it's not Buffy, if it's not Vampire Diaries or Twilight, or we need something with some teenage vampires somewhere.
And the thing with nostalgia TV is that I think they're often torn between, do we do a prequel or do we do a sequel? And there's actually a couple examples where they've done both.
Yeah, and one of the ones that I think comes to mind that didn't really hit the mark on either of them is Sex and the City.
Yeah. I think great concept, great setup. I mean, New York City, some iconic characters with Carrie and Samantha. Unfortunately, in the sequel, there is some dynamics at play where not everyone signed back on for And Just Like That. And then the prequel, I think it's also like their characters it was Sex in the City. Now, how can we go see them in high school and still have the same tone?
Yeah, I definitely think the prequel suffered from maybe them being a little bit too young. Obviously, you can't use Carrie Bradshaw in the prequel, so they had to go quite younger, much younger. But it definitely felt as though you couldn't keep the same kind of age group that would be watching it. For And Just Like That, I think Sex and the City exists in the time period that it was created in. And I think they struggle to take those characters and put them in the modern world.
Yeah.
And I think we see it a couple times. They make it a plot point, essentially, to have some of them struggling to kind of grapple with, you know, where their kids are going in life with careers and whatnot. But it just the chemistry felt off. And they didn't feel like themselves, and it didn't feel as natural. They definitely missed the Samantha, who was probably the Sex in the City. And I think missing some of that chemistry just cost it quite a bit.
Yeah. I have to agree. It was very forced. Like, you're watching it for the first season, you're like, oh my gosh, what's Charlotte up to? Like, what are her girls up to? And is she still with her husband? Like, there's so many like good things that you're like looking forward to. And Miranda, you know, she had Brady and Steve, and I think it just kind of fell apart after. You're like watching for a little bit, and then at one point I was like, what show is this? Like it.
And it's definitely, when you watch a show that's based off of the relationships and that thrives really heavily on an end game. I mean, everyone was expecting Carrie and Big to get together and stay together in Sex in the City. And then to watch And Just Like That, where obviously Big dies and that's not how it happens, can feel almost as though you're disrespecting the source material. I mean, we're seeing it in Elle as well, where people are shipping her with Dustin, but we know she's gonna find her love when she's in university, and we know that she ends up with Emmett and not with Dustin or Warner or all these other characters that they're going to introduce in the prequel. So I think that's kind of where Sex and the City prequel and sequel suffered, in that in the prequel, if she's in high school, she's going to be finding a romance and a boyfriend, and she is, but you know that it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So it's hard to be invested in the same way. And Just Like That, you almost feel like all the years you invested in Sex and the City were for nothing, because those relationships we spent years watching and rooting for were torn apart pretty quickly on that show.
Yeah, like the first episode, pretty much. But the one that got it right, Dexter. One of the strongest prequels with Original Sin, and the sequel, which is still going on, New Blood, an incredible show.
Yeah, and the prequel did both. It respected the source material and answered a question, because unlike most of these prequels where, yeah, you already know where he ends up there or where they end up, you wanted to know how Dexter got those things. You wanted to know why the blood slides, what was his first kill like, or what was, we do see in Dexter kind of that forming moment of him in the storage bin or in the container. And we see some of that, but to get more of that dynamic between him and Deborah and him and his dad really added something new.
Yeah. The casting was on point. Like, I don't know what they did, if they actually put Angel Batista in a time machine and sent him back, but like spot on, Deb spot on. It really did feel like we were just taking a peek into the 80s to see how they grew up. And I think it was cool because we also got to see other characters, like how did Angel and Deb kind of grow up too. So it was a very well-rounded prequel. I think the sequel as well is really well done.
Yeah, and there was technically two, right? There was New Blood, which was just kind of supposed to be that let's touch base and see what happened. And then there was the true continuation with Dexter Resurrection, where technically there is no question really at the end of Dexter. New Blood, they kind of do a fix-it.
Yeah. Because we thought he died at the end of New Blood.
Exactly.
And that's the one place I'll be like, you know what? I'm going to let this TV magic slide, because I was happy to see a continuation. And again, it answers some questions, right? Like, he made it very clear that this was his nature. He could not help himself. So would somebody in their 50s just be able to give it up?
Yeah, and I think they did, again, a really good job of respecting that source material where, Dexter believed he had no feelings, had no capacity for love or anything like that. And then he has his son, and it changes his outlook a little bit, and it complicates a lot of those feelings. And that is what this show is all about. It is his nature interacting and, conflicting with his love for his son and trying to do right by Harrison. And I think it's such a good continuation. I think both were so well done. In the end, they ended up picking and deciding to go with the sequel or the continuation, Resurrection, instead of the prequel. Again, because there's more, you're less tied to the end result. Yeah. There is just more to go. In the prequel, Batista can't die. He has to make it to the original Dexter show. Deborah can't die. Dexter can't die or get caught. So you're a little bit more limited in what you can do, whereas it's free game in Resurrection, as we saw with Batista. And so I think it's really interesting how well they took the source material, remixed it in both ways, and just gave really satisfying TV.
Yeah. And I think, if I remember, they were actually playing at the same time.
Yeah, or one right after the other. I mean, it was really, really well done. And I think part of it, too, is just because it wasn't just about the relationships. It had that extra storyline of, they're working in a police station. There's different cases and projects that they're essentially working on. So it just gave that extra story to work with. If there's one thing we've learned, it's that nostalgia alone isn't enough. Fans aren't asking for a copy of what came before. We're asking for stories that respect the originals while giving us a new reason to come back. Hollywood has had some incredible opportunities this year, but whether these reboots become the next big hit or the next big disappointment, or don't come to be at all, comes down to those choices. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into TV shows, hidden details, fan theories, and industry trends. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep questioning, keep theorizing, and we'll see you in the next one. Talk to you soon. Bye.